Welcome everyone to Daf Yomi 1 week at a time. Today is our first lesson of Masechet Ketubot, and that is very exciting to be beginning a new Masechet. So for those of you who are new, welcome. For those of you who have just finished Yevamot, Kol HaKavod, and this is very exciting to begin a new Masechet with you. So I'm just going to review, or sorry, I'm going to introduce the Masechet. Um, we just finished Yevamot, and we spoke a lot about family relationships, and we spoke about the husband dying, but we have mentioned the Ketuva, but we haven't really mentioned or discussed the details of the Ketuva. So it's important to understand that the Ketuva is going to explain the mutual obligations of the husband and the wife. And this is going to be at the beginning of the wedding, during the marriage, and at the end of the marriage, if they end up getting a divorce. The Ketuva is generally written down. My friend Shuli Mishkin, for those of you who are interested, on Hadran, just published an article about archaeological finds of different Ketuvot throughout the ages and what they looked like, what they incorporated. Nowadays, many Jewish homes have a Ketuva on the wall. Many times it's a piece of art. But it's important to understand that, first of all, it's usually written down. But even if you don't write down the Ketuva, the things mentioned in the Ketuva are obligations. So even if you don't write it down, they do still apply. Um, the usually, again, the Ketuva we're going to discuss, and we did discuss in the last Masechet, right? If this happens or that happens, does the woman get her Ketuva? So what does that mean, to get her Ketuva? It means, does she get the sums of money that were promised to her in the Ketuva, in the contract? And that is always a discussion. We're going to learn that there was a standardized amount of money that every woman received, or it was written in the Ketuva. We're going to learn that a virgin, a betula, who gets married gets 200 zuz in the event that there is a divorce. A widow or a divorcee will get 100 zuz in the event of a divorce. Yes, we'll discuss. Again, I don't think it's I don't think it's really talking about value. I don't think that the Gemara sees the women, worth more or less. I think it's probably just about status and marital status, and I think that that's important to understand. But again, we'll discuss it when we get there in the Gemara. There is a disagreement or a machloket if a Ketuva is biblical in origin or rabbinic in origin. Again, the purpose of the Ketuva was to protect the woman. It's really important. I know sometimes we make certain statements and we feel maybe offended by certain statements in the Gemara. It is important to understand that this entire Masechet is about protecting the woman. So that's just really important to understand, that this is a document that says that in the event of a divorce, the woman will get a certain amount of money. So that is just, I think, very important to understand. A man, we mentioned certain sums of money, but the husband can add to those sums. So if any of you have listened to the reading of the Ketuva at a wedding, and after this Masechet, you will definitely listen to it a little bit more closely. It usually says that that she gets 200 zuz plus, right, ve'od, and usually there's like another sum of money that is added. Sometimes it could be thousands of shekel. Lynn mentioned, right, it's like a prenup. It is an agreement to make sure that she is protected. However, it is interesting that Lynn, that you mentioned prenups. It is important to understand that it's not really a prenup. And for those of you who are not aware, there is a very important movement nowadays to get new couples to sign a halachic prenup. A halachic prenup is there in order to, again, protect the woman, basically to protect both of them, to make sure that in the event of a divorce, that the husband will give a get. And we'll talk when we get to Gittin, the importance of giving the get, without which you cannot get halachically divorced or divorced in Jewish law. So there are actually real halachic prenups nowadays. So I'm happy to discuss that another time when we get into more of issues of that. Okay, just a few more pieces of information just for the introduction. There are two stages to marriage. We did see this previously, but just it's important to remember. There is the kiddushin or erusin, right? Kiddushin means betrothal. We saw a little bit of that in the last Masechet, and erusin, which literally means engagement, but it is not like the engagement of nowadays, where you're like, oh my gosh, look, I got engaged. In the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, engagement meant one step closer to marriage, meaning if one was to break an engagement, a Erusin, in the time of the Mishnah or the Gemara, she would actually need a divorce. So it's not the same as nowadays. Nowadays, that is not the case. If someone is engaged and they break up, nothing has to happen, meaning they just say, we made a mistake, and they part ways. In the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, that is not the case. You do need a get from Kiddushin or Erusin. So that's stage one. We now do that together at the wedding ceremony. The next step is called Nissuin. That is the actual wedding ceremony. So we actually put the two of those together at our weddings. The Nissuin is done under the chuppah. Some people, there are different opinions. What really is the Nissuin? Is it the chuppah ceremony? Is it when they actually go into his house? Is it when they actually have relations? Like what it really means, Nissuin. And we'll get to that in this Masechet. The last thing is that it's important to understand that in those days, those two stages were sometimes separated by a year. So like you would get betrothed, right, kiddushin, or engaged, and then Erusin, and then wait a year for them to get ready, right, to fill up the trousseau, for the man to prepare for the wedding, and then the wedding would be a year later. Okay, let's go to our first daf again to remind us. Daf 2, right? Bet is the first daf of the Masechet, because we've been learning for a long time, and we just jump right in. There is no page 1. And again, another beautiful idea was that page 1 is derech eretz, right? We say, right, derech eretz being a kind person, right? The famous line, derech eretz kadma leTorah, right? First we're going to be good people, and then we're going to learn Torah. So page 1 was be a good person, and now we're on page 2. Okay, the Mishnah tells us that a betula is a virgin who gets married.
I'm sitting here doing my.
What? Oops. Okay. All right. The virgin who gets married should get married on Wednesday, and a widow should get married on Thursday. We're going to explain why in a minute. The Mishnah tells us that the courts sit on Monday and Thursday. Therefore, if the betula, the virgin, gets married on a Wednesday, and we will discuss this as we continue, and also in Masechet Kiddushin, we are concerned, right, if, let's say, he finds out she's really not a virgin. She was supposed to be, and she wasn't. There is a fear that maybe, or concern that maybe she had an affair while they were engaged. Again, as I mentioned, the engagement period is quasi being married. If she has an affair, that is very severe. And therefore, we want to make sure that he can go to court the next morning. Therefore, since the court sits on Thursday, they should get married on Wednesday night. Okay, the Gemara tells us that, as I mentioned before, there used to be 1 year in between the kiddushin, the betrothal, and the wedding. And if a year passed and they didn't have the wedding, right? Let's say they set the date and they were going to get married on, Aleph Tammuz, and then it gets to Aleph Tammuz, and for whatever reason, which we'll discuss, let's say they do not get married, the Gemara tells us that he needs to begin to support her from that day. Again, remember, we want to protect the woman. Part of protecting the woman is supporting her. She expected to be married by Aleph Tammuz. She is not married at this point. He needs to start supporting her. And that could also be a reason why they have to get married on a Wednesday. And the Gemara will explain this in a minute. Maybe we should say, right, if the court sits on Monday and Thursday, why don't they get married Sunday night, right? That's also before the court date. So the Gemara says you don't get married on Sunday because the husband needs to prepare for the wedding at least 3 days before the wedding. So if you're going to get married on a Sunday, there's really no time to prepare because you have Shabbat beforehand. Therefore, you prepare Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and then the wedding is on Thursday. The Gemara calls this shakdu. Shakdu means the sages were very concerned that the husband should have enough time to prepare for the wedding. Again, we want to make sure it's a beautiful event, that there's plenty of food, right? If it's on Sunday, that's very complicated. Therefore, you should get married on a Wednesday. What if one of them got sick within that year? Remember, we said you have 1 year to have the wedding, and let's say they're late. Well, what if one of them got sick within the year, and that's why they put off the wedding? So then he does not have to support her when that date comes up because, they couldn't get married in that whole year. What if she became a nida, right? She became impure because she was menstruating, and that's why she couldn't get married on that day, again, because they couldn't be together. So again, he does not need to support her if that's the reason why they're not having the wedding. What if it wasn't her normal time to bleed, but she does anyway? Does he need to support her? And again, here the Gemara is talking about, is it her fault? Again, they don't really mean fault, but meaning if it's something that maybe she could have controlled or because of her, then he shouldn't have to support her. If it's not because of her, then he should have to support her, right? If she delays, then he doesn't have to support her after that, on that date. And the question is, right, is there this concept of ones? Ones means, right, in Hebrew, the word ones means it wasn't her fault, right, or anybody's fault. We'll see. We're going to get into different examples of ones. And the question is, do we say that there's this concept of ones for a wedding? And then the Gemara says there's no concept of ones for a get. What does that mean? So the Gemara gives us the very famous case. Let's say a man says to his wife, I'm going far away for business. I don't know what's going to happen, so I'm going to give you this get, right, this bill of divorce. And he says, if I'm not back within 12 months, so then this is a divorce and you're divorced, meaning I don't want there to be, we saw this at the end of Yevamot, right? We don't want there to be any problems. I don't want you to have to worry. Am I alive? Am I not alive? If I don't come back in 12 months, you're divorced. Now, what happens if he gets sick and he can't get back? Does it count? Is there a divorce or not? So the Gemara says the get counts, meaning they're divorced, even though it's not his fault. He got sick. The Gemara says it doesn't matter. You should have stipulated in this, stipulation, right? This is your get if I don't come back in 12 months. But if I'm sick or if it wasn't my fault, so then it's not a get. I think we have a judge here. I'm sure she can attest to the legal ramifications of stipulations. So here the Gemara says he should have put it in the stipulations. If he didn't, then that's it. If he's not back, I don't care why he's not back. It's a get. However, right, if he dies, so then it's not seen as a get, meaning that's really not his fault, but that doesn't count. What about what if he says, here's a crazy case, right? He says, if I don't come back in 30 days, here's your get, and then he gets to almost to the town, and he's on the other side of the river, and he can't get across the river, right? There's a ferry strike, or he misses the last ferry, right? He misses the last flight, and he's standing on the other side of the river, and he yells, I'm here, right? So the Gemara says, doesn't count. You're not back. You said you were going to get back. Then they're considered divorced. Again, like onus, right? He says, the Gemara says onus doesn't count. He should have, if he, it's interesting. The Gemara says it's very common to miss the ferry. So you should have written down in the original stipulation, like if I don't make it back, then this is your divorce. But if I miss the ferry, that's not really a divorce, right? You should have put it in. Okay, that's daf 2. Daf 3. Again, as we mentioned, we want to protect the woman. Therefore, we want to say that if he doesn't come back, it's the divorce is a divorce, meaning the get works, because we don't want her to say like, oh, I know he really loves me, and I'm sure he wanted to get back, but he's probably, stuck in traffic or missed his flight, right? We don't want you to wait around. We want you to recognize that he should have been back, and therefore the divorce is a divorce. And also the opposite, we don't want women, jumping into, making assumptions. We want there to be a divorce if that was the stipulation. An important concept comes up here on Daf 3. I'll say it in Aramaic and then I'll translate. So the line is Kol de Mekadesh Adata de Rabbanan Mekadesh, which means anybody who gets betrothed, right? Mekadesh, anybody who gets betrothed, they do it they have in mind the sages. What does that mean? That the authority of the sages basically can affect the marriage, right? What does that mean? The sages can say if this marriage, right, or this divorce is valid or not, right? One could say, how could a court determine whether the marriage is valid or not, right, or the divorce is valid or not? Shouldn't it be between just me and my husband? How could it be? And the Gemara says, right, it's important to recognize, and now, of course, we're learning this, so you'll recognize the next time you go to the wedding, right? What do they say? Harei at mikudeshet li. Remember when the groom says to the bride, you are now betrothed to me, kedat Moshe v'Yisrael, right? With having in mind, or with the authority of Moses, of Moshe, and all of Israel, meaning we're very aware of this betrothal, and the court has authority over it. Again, we want to say this is all to protect the woman, right? If the husband leaves and never comes back, we want to be able to assist to help this woman. Okay, some say that Rava actually holds that there is the concept of onus with a get, meaning that all those cases that we mentioned, right, he gets sick, or he couldn't make it, that the divorce would not really be a full-fledged divorce, but that is not how we rule. Um, Okay. We mentioned that the courts sit on Monday and Thursday. If that sounds familiar, those are also the days that we read from the Torah in our davening. Those go together, right? The idea, and here the Gemara tells us that this was a decree of Ezra. If you remember, Ezra is the time of what we call Shivat Zion, the return to Zion. After the 70 years in Bavel, the Jewish people come back to Israel, and they reestablish Jewish law in Israel. And he decreed that the courts should sit on Monday and Thursday. That meant that those would be market days. That meant that those were times where they would read the Torah. Those were the days that people came into the big cities. And therefore, as we mentioned before, the wedding should be on Wednesday before the court would sit on Thursday. Interestingly, the Gemara tells us that during dangerous times, they actually were allowed to get married on Tuesday. And because of ones, which we have to again understand what that means. Here it means something again dangerous but different. You could even get married on Monday. So the Gemara explains that when you said that Jewish weddings should be on Wednesday, and everybody recognized that the weddings should be on Wednesday, it seems that the Gemara tells us that there used to be an edict that went out that the non-Jewish governor of the town would say that brides would have to sleep with them on their wedding night, right? The idea of what's called Prima Nachta. It's actually a disagreement if this actually really did exist or not, but the Gemara says that this is something that happened, and therefore, right, these governors or prefects would come to town, and they knew that wedding night was Wednesday, so they would come on Wednesday and grab all the brides. Therefore, they said you can move the wedding to Tuesday night. The Gemara says, well, why, they're not going to get killed. I mean, it's terrible, but, maybe they should still get married then. And the Gemara says, no, the women would actually, they were so modest that they would rather give up their lives than to sleep with the non-Jewish the non-Jewish ruler, and therefore it was actually what we would call pikuach nefesh, right? To save it was life-threatening, and therefore they moved the weddings to Tuesday. And yes, as Sarah mentions, right, when Tuesday night is a nice night to have. Or Tuesday is a nice day to have a wedding because of it says Ketov twice in the creation on Tuesday, so that is true. The Gemara tells us that what is this onus, this idea that it was not good to get married on Tuesday, so you can get married on Monday. And here the Gemara describes that the general used to come to town with all the troops, and they were concerned that he would just take all the food from the wedding or for the wedding. He would take it for his troops, therefore move the wedding to Monday. Or another case would be what if the father of the groom or the mother of the bride died on the day of the wedding? So then what do you do? The Gemara describes that you don't tell the bride and the groom. You conduct the wedding ceremony. They should be together. They should have relations that first night. Then they separate. Then they have 7 days of Sheva Brachot, meaning they celebrate for 7 days, and then they after they have relations and they separate, they bury the parent. then they have Sheva Brachot, and then only after Sheva Brachot they then sit Shiva, right? They mourn for their parents, and in this whole time they're going to sleep separately because the Gemara says that in public they're not going to mourn, but in private they do, and when someone is mourning, they should not. Normally, they can sleep in the same room. They cannot have relations, but because this is a newlywed couple, they should sleep separately. Though at the top of Daf 4, the Gemara tells us that the bride can adorn herself so that she's beautiful for her husband. It's interesting that the Gemara says that this is all if they already prepared everything for the wedding, but if they didn't, then one second. And it's specifically the father of the groom and the mother of the bride. But if it's the opposite, so then you have the funeral, and then you push off the wedding because there will be their parents will be there to help them. It's interesting that the Gemara seems to imply that the groom needs his father and that the bride needs her mother. And without those two figures, you just have to have the wedding right there and then. You can't push it off. Okay. If they, as I mentioned, if they already slept together, then they do not need to separate during that week. We do trust them. And here the Gemara talks about a case, what's called in Hebrew chupat nida, which is a woman who becomes a nida, meaning she becomes impure because of menstruation at her wedding, meaning either right before her wedding, but at her wedding, if she's a nida, that means that night they cannot be together, and therefore they cannot sleep alone in, let's say, in a hotel room or in their apartment. What happens is sometimes they have, a young sibling sleep over in the house. They can stay in the same room, but there needs to be somebody in the house with them. And since we're talking about a woman menstruating and being impure, the Gemara tells us that there are certain tasks that a woman normally does for her husband, and she can do all of those things while she's in nida, while she's impure, except for 3 tasks. And these are actually the basis for the laws of family purity that we have nowadays. The 3 things she cannot do is pour his drink, arrange his bed, or wash his hands and his feet, right? These are seen as very intimate actions. It's interesting because we don't really relate to that, I think, nowadays. But definitely in the time of the Mishnah and the Gemara, this was something that only the wife did, not a servant, not anybody else. They were seen as very intimate, and therefore a woman who's in nida cannot do these actions. However, she can do it if they are in mourning. So again, if she's in mourning, she can do it, but because again, we trust her to restrain. Again, they cannot have relations while they are in mourning. But if it's when he's in mourning, we don't really trust him, and sometimes they did sleep separately in that case. If the wife is mourning, so the husband needs to act like he is in mourning, definitely in public, and vice versa, meaning the spouse kind of reflects what the other spouse is doing. In general, we are stringent with mourning, but with the laws of mourning, and mourning, however, mourning during the wedding is going to be more lenient. As we said, you're going to wait 7 days, and therefore we want to make sure, because we are so lenient, we want to make sure that they sleep separately at that time. Daf 5 tells us that you can't have the wedding and then the first bi'ah, bi'ah means intercourse, you cannot have that happen on Friday night. And we're going to get into a quite a lengthy discussion, really, that's going to bring us back to the laws of Shabbat. The Gemara tells us on Daf 5, why can't you have the first intercourse on a Friday night? Because it will create a wound. A wound is a problem on Shabbat because she's going to bleed, and you're not allowed to create a wound on Shabbat. And you also shouldn't have a wedding on Saturday night because we're concerned that the whole Shabbat you're going to be talking about all the things you have to prepare. Right, because if you remember, we learned in Masechet Shabbat, davar, you're not allowed to speak about things that we're not allowed to do on Shabbat, right? We have to, right, it's always good to kind of focus on Shabbat and don't make plans for after Shabbat on Shabbat. But then the Gemara says, wait a minute, we know you are allowed to deal with matters that pertain to a mitzvah, so then this should be okay. So the Gemara says, no, we're actually concerned that you're actually going to do some sort of preparation for the wedding. Maybe you'll slaughter the animals in preparation for the wedding, and therefore, because you're so stressed about the wedding, you might be so preoccupied, and therefore you shouldn't make the wedding on Saturday night either. Okay, now, right, as we mentioned, so the woman is going to get married. They're going to get married on Wednesday and have relations on Wednesday night. Wednesday night is already seen as Thursday, so Sarah mentioned the idea of Ketov mentioned twice. Here the Gemara talks about different days that are days of blessing, right? So the Gemara tells us that Wednesday night, which is already Thursday, is a day of blessing because God gave a blessing to the fish to be fruitful and multiply on the fifth day. Therefore, Wednesday night is a good night. Widows get married on a Thursday and have relations Thursday night, which is really Friday. And on Friday, meaning the sixth day, is also a day of blessing because God gave a blessing to Adam, right, to pru uravu, right, to be fruitful and multiply. So we see that both of these days are auspicious days for a wedding. So the Gemara also tells us that why does the widow get married on Thursday night? This is to make sure that the husband of the widow will celebrate with her for 3 days. What does that mean? Right? If they get married Thursday night, he's not going to go to work on Friday, and then you have Friday, you have Shabbat, and you have Sunday. Meaning, Thursday, Friday. She's going to get married Thursday, so Thursday, Friday, Shabbos. Right? The husband is not going to go to work, and he will celebrate with his new wife for those 3 days. Okay. From here, the Gemara gives a few drashot explanations on different verses. And here the Gemara talks about why your ear is shaped the way it is. So the Gemara says if you hear something inappropriate, then, why your ears, exactly, and your finger, exactly. Why are your fingers so pointy and sharp? If you hear something inappropriate, you should stick your finger in your ear. It fits really nicely, and don't listen to inappropriate things. And that's why we need individual fingers. And I think it's just fascinating, right? The Gemara goes through the names. First of all, if anybody wants to know the names in Hebrew of each of the fingers, it's here on Daf 5. And the Gemara tells us how each finger is important, right? Each finger is needed for a different action or measurement in the temple. So I'll leave that to you to do some review if you remember what each of the fingers are for. If not, you can look it up again in Daf 5. Or if you don't want to stick your finger in your ear, here, I'll move it, right? You can fold your earlobe into your ear. That also works, right? That's why the earlobe is soft and the rest of the ear is hard. You can just put your earlobe up into your ear. Okay, let's go back to our question from the beginning of this daf. Can the first relations be on Shabbat? And now we're going to go back into the laws of Shabbat. So we said that the blood, right? Again, it's important to understand that the bleeding that a woman has on the first night is what's called hymenal bleeding, right? It's from her hymen when it tears because of the penetration. So the question is, number one, is this considered a wound? The Gemara understands the blood here in two ways, right? The Gemara says, is it that the blood is just sitting there and there's penetration and then the blood just comes out? Or are you really creating a wound and then she's bleeding from that wound? So those are two ways of understanding where I don't want to say where the blood is coming from, but the nature of the release of that blood, and that really is going to impact the laws of Shabbat. So, right, if the blood is just sitting there and waiting, and then it comes out, so then it's not really seen as a wound. If it's that the blood is on the inside, and then there's a wound, it cuts it open, and then or whatever, it tears, and then the blood comes out, that's seen as a wound, right? Does he want there to be blood, right? Is this seen as a constructive act because he wants there to be blood there, or is it destructive, meaning that's not what it's about, right? It's about pleasure, it's about penetration, it's about a mitzvah. It has nothing to do with the blood. So that's another discussion. Right? Does he want to create this opening, or is that, again, seen as something unintentional, right? If you remember from the laws of Shabbat, we had the concept in Hebrew called davar she'eno mitkaven, right? Something that is unintentional. I don't right, let's say the case is I'm dragging my chair across my lawn. While I'm dragging the chair across my lawn, it makes this what's the word? Furrow. Thank you. Furrow, right? So, right. So it's making this furrow that's needed to plant, but I don't want to plant, right? I'm just trying to get the chair from point A to point B, right? Rabbi Shimon says that is permitted on Shabbat because I do not need this. The consequence is I don't care about the consequence. That's not my intention. Rabbi Huda says, no, I care about, meaning even if you don't intend for that consequence, it's a consequence and therefore it is not permitted. So that's a machloket that we saw in Shabbat, and that's coming up here again. And also this idea of something, if something is destructive, it's called kilkul, right? Destruction, that is permitted, again, according to Rabbi Yehuda, only if something is constructive, mitaken, right, to fix. If it's constructive, then that would be prohibited because that's seen as a constructive act. Okay, so those are all the pieces to the puzzle, and the Gemara tells us on Daf 6 that it's a machloket between Rav and Shmuel if this is permitted or not. Rav seems to say that an unintentional action is permitted, and therefore this would be permitted. However, we're going to bring up another concept from Shabbat. In Aramaic, the concept is psik resha v'lo yamut, right? Psik resha means, it literally means you're going to cut off its head and it's not going to die. If you remember, we had the story of a chicken, right? A child wants to play with the head of the chicken. Don't ask, I don't know. And the father's like, oh, okay, fine. I'll cut the head off of the chicken so you can play with it. Oh, no, oops, the chicken died. What do you mean the chicken died? When you cut off its head, the chicken died, right? So a psik resha means that if something is inevitable, whether you intended for it or not, it is not, if that inevitable consequence is forbidden, so then you cannot do that action, right? I can't say, I can cut off the head of that chicken because that's what my child wants. I don't really want it to die. It is for sure going to die, and therefore you are not allowed to do that. So now we go back to our case, and the question is, again, do we see the fact that the woman is going to bleed as a psik resha? Do we see it as an inevitable consequence? And I think we all know that it is not necessarily the case. Not every single woman bleeds the first time, and therefore, again, Rav says that this is permissible, and Shmuel seems to say that it is forbidden. There is a Breita that says in the opposite way as well. Okay, the Gemara says that since we're talking about Friday night and having relations, so the Gemara tells us that a groom is exempt from saying Kriyat Shema, from saying the Shema, the night of his wedding, till he has relations. Again, another concept in Hebrew, osek b'mitzvah, patur min ha-mitzvah. Right? If you are involved in doing a mitzvah, you are exempt from doing another mitzvah, right? I don't have to stop in the middle of doing one mitzvah in order to go do another mitzvah. Of course, we've seen this in the Gemara before. If something is time sensitive, maybe you do. Here, we say that as long as they have not yet had relations, he does not have to say Shema because he is preoccupied with this mitzvah. He needs to do this mitzvah. The Gemara seems to say that he has till Saturday night. He has 4 nights from Wednesday till Saturday night. That seems to prove that he could have relations on Friday night, right? If you say 4 nights starting on Wednesday, so Wednesday night, Thursday night, Friday night, right? That would prove that Friday night would be permissible. The Gemara says, no, maybe he's just preoccupied that he can't do it on Friday night. He tried Wednesday, Thursday, now Friday night he can't do it, and because he is so preoccupied, he is still exempt. The Gemara says, wait a minute, if you can't do the mitzvah, you wouldn't be exempt, meaning if at this moment he cannot do the mitzvah, so then he should have to say Shema. And since we don't say that, it seems to prove that they can have their first relations on Friday night. Again, here the Gemara at the end of Daf 6 again says to us that maybe bleeding is not inevitable. It's not a psik resha, because it seems that there were some men who were experts on preventing bleeding for the first time. Again, it's fascinating that the perspective is from the man, right? He was the expert. It's not that maybe she wasn't bleeding, but again, the Gemara was written by the men. It's just interesting. So the Gemara explains that there seem to have been many people who were experts on preventing bleeding the first time. However, this could be seen as complicated because, as we will see in this Masechet and in other Masechtot, we want generally, if the girl was a virgin, the husband wants to see the blood in order to prove that is the case. So the Gemara describes that there were people who set up the room beforehand to make sure that there was no foul play, right? That she didn't hide bloodied sheets, or that he didn't take away sheets. So the Gemara says those people are still there. We want to make sure that everybody is honest. And the last point of the Gemara on Daf 6 goes back to, again, the laws of Shabbat about popping a boil, right, or a pimple, right? If you pop a boil, is this permitted or not? Again, one could see the correlation, right? There is some liquid. You're creating a wound or not, right? An opening or a wound, and the liquid comes out. The Gemara says that this is not comparable or correlated directly to the first night, because when you have a pimple or a boil, the Gemara describes that the pus is gathered and already separated from the body. It's just waiting to be released, whereas that is not the case of the blood that is going to she's going to bleed the first night. It might be gathered in the area, but it's not separated from the body, and therefore, again, maybe it is still maybe it's forbidden on Friday night, whereas the popping the boil or the pimple might be okay, based on the fact that it is already separated. And with that, we finish the first few dapim of Masechet Ketubot. May our learning be productive and exciting and interesting, and looking forward to continuing to learn. If you're noticing, the dapim, the pages are much shorter than the pages in Yevamot, and I think less complicated. So that bodes well for the next few months for us. So wishing everyone a wonderful week. And this Sunday is Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz. It's a fast day. So wishing everyone a meaningful and I guess easy or not so easy, but meaningful fast. And looking forward to seeing you next week on Tuesday night. Have a great week,
Rabbi.
everyone.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Mara,
Yes.
yes, we had Erusim before we had Nissuin, with a few months apart.
You did Tanaim.
Naim, right?
So Tanaim are a little different, but it is very
Mm.
close. It is very close, which is
But
why.
Daddy said we had Erusim, not Naim.
Okay. Very
Yeah, we have a certificate,
okay. So it's a good
old
thing.
fashioned.
It's a good thing you got. It's a good thing you got married. All
Yeah.
all's well that ends well. So you were very Talmudic. You wanted to go back to the olden days.
I don't know. I guess our parents wanted it.
Okay. They wanted to.
Daddy says it was our minhag.
Okay. Very nice. Okay. Very nice. So this is where it comes from, meaning it's based on this Mishnah and Gemara, this idea that there's the first stage of marriage and then the second stage of marriage. So yeah, excellent.
Okay. Good night.
Okay,
Thank you. It was very, very interesting.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.